Hey, welcome back, guys. So in this video I want to talk to you about my thoughts on the documentary called The Last Blockbuster. This movie was released in 2020, and I finally got around to watching it because you can watch it for free on YouTube with some advertisements. So I will leave the link for that in the description if you want to watch it. But I originally saw it on the Amazon video store. So the reason I wanted to watch this was I was very interested in seeing how Blockbuster kind of came to be and sort of how it fell, but mainly also for the nostalgia. And I felt like, as a kid who grew up with a Blockbuster near me, in the 90s, it was almost important that I do watch it because, I think it's a history. There's a lot of history within it. On the surface, it's just a video rental store, but behind the scenes, there's a lot more going on. And I think that's why I like this documentary, because it kind of shows that in a much easier way, digestible way. So one of the things that I found out about it was that, video rental stores at first were never supposed to be a thing. Because when you had the VCR come out and VHS in the early 80s, video rentals and basically movie studios, I think, took them to court. People who were these companies, VCR companies, because they thought that they would lose money, right? Because if you could buy the movie on VHS, you could potentially show it to seven. You could play it at home and 7 people could watch it, let's say. And so those 7 people all watched the movie. So instead of going to the theater, paying for a ticket. So in the very early days, home theater was not really a thing for a while. And, mostly movie studios, most of the money they made was, from, I would say, directly from theaters themselves, selling the rights to the movie theaters to, to play their movies and getting a cut from the movie theaters. But the courts ruled that down, and so we have video stores pop up around the country, mom and pop video stores. And at the same time, Blockbuster was emerging, in the 80s, mid 80s, to become one of the biggest movie conglomerates in the world. I'm just trying to think, what I remember from the movie. And so the thing that stood out to me as I was watching is what they said about how Blockbuster decided or planned to, because you have to remember the companies that were making the videos, the VHS tapes in the beginning, they were charging $99 a tape back in in the 80s. That is insane. Can you imagine paying $99 for a copy of a video? And so the mom and pop stores, because they didn't have a lot of financial momentum, they would have to, pay out of pocket themselves. And so, for example, say a new release came out, they could only buy like 3 copies of the movie. But the way Blockbuster circumvented this was that they made a deal with the movie studios, and they made a rev share program, a revenue sharing agreement, where Blockbuster could buy all these copies of the movies, new releases and whatnot, at a way lower price, at a discount. But they would have to also share their revenue from the video store sales with the company. So that's how Blockbuster was able to kind of put a foot in the door when it came to getting the movies into the stores without having to, pay a lot. I mean, $99 for one copy. So I believe after that happened, that's when Blockbuster really started to gain a foothold. But not only that, was when they were facing mom and pop stores, the Blockbuster, I forget his name, the director of Blockbuster, came up with a whatchamacallit, a way to, like, a database. Yeah, came up with a database to kind of check inventory to see, okay, how many videos do I need of this, who is renting this, how many videos have people rented from this particular store. So they developed a inventory, a database, on a very, on the computer systems. You might have remembered seeing them when you went to Blockbuster, how, those computer systems looked old as hell even then. But that ended up being another reason why Blockbuster emerged as the biggest video rental store, and it ended up taking away mom and pop video stores because of that. I mean, mom and pop video stores, they didn't have that kind of system, that inventory system that Blockbuster had. So Blockbuster was able to automate everything, and with that database system in place, they could build a lot of stores now that they didn't have to worry about that kind of overhead. Whereas mom and pop stores, they just basically had to do everything the slow way, right? And so I sort of remember that growing up as well. I remember there was a Blockbuster near me. There was some Hollywood Videos. There was locally owned video rental stores. And this movie kind of talks about that as well. How different franchise owners at first started having their own family-run video rental stores, but Blockbuster was buying them out. And so they either were bought out, or they closed down. So that's when Blockbuster sort of got on the rise. So the two main things that stood out to me was that, number one, Blockbuster made a deal with the video studios to buy those movies in bulk at a lower price. So number one, they had a lot of movies, copies of movies that they could rent out. And secondly, they had a system, a database system, very primitive one that enabled them to check for inventory, kind of account for all the rentals and copies, stuff like that, which video mom and pop stores didn't have. So this is when Blockbuster was like really growing. Its peak was in 2004. But in the movie it was saying that at a point there was a new Blockbuster like every 17 hours or something like that. So another thing I liked about this movie was it talked about the experiences that going to a video store entails. and it reminded me of some of the things I forgot. And some of those things were, I remember checking out a movie, and the person at the register would either be like, would say nothing and just check me out, or they would be like, "Hey, this is a good movie, good pick here," and give opinions, or they might say, "I don't know about this one." So I remember that, and I completely forgot about that experience of going to a Blockbuster, sometimes getting opinions from the staff who work there. There were even shelves for staff picks, which was great. And it just kind of it showed like an actual box, the VHS box that it came in, that looked and felt like a brick, with all its information on the side, all the plastic. And I remember too, which I also forgot, was when you would go to a Blockbuster and you'd rent like 3 different movies, right? One would be a new release, let's say. Another one would be like an older one. The register, the staff person would be like, "Hey, X movie is due by Thursday by noon, and B movie is due on Sunday by 2. And you would never remember that, but they would always just say it, but it would always be on the receipt. And I was like, "Oh yeah, I remember that. Good times." So that's what I like to. This documentary kind of was, talking about how the experience of going to a video store is something that you can't replace, with what we have now with streaming, Netflix, and I really felt that because going to a physical store, walking around the aisles, looking at the covers of the movies, and then deciding, okay, I want to watch this one. Now we have it on our phone, on our smartphones, and I experienced that. There's no really physical. There's even online searching what movies you want to watch. I'll be on you'll be on Netflix or Amazon Prime Video, and it'll just show movies, and you search the movie on the search bar. So I definitely felt that connection there between a physical store and the experience versus what we have now, which is just streaming, right, for the most part. And a guy was saying, one of the guys in the documentary was saying, at what point will companies no longer make DVDs or Blu-rays, And so some movies that, don't make it, stop being produced, are they going to be forgotten? And I don't think that will be the case, because a lot of movies, even ones that are old, found their way to the internet eventually, so people can still find them. So I don't think that's a big issue, but I feel like for people who collect, who enjoy having the actual DVD itself, someday, people, the companies will start making the physical copies, right? So a lot of people, including myself, thought that the Blockbuster's demise was solely from Netflix and streaming services, even like Redbox. Redbox in the early days, I remember they would have these kiosks, and for like $1 you could rent a movie. And so there was this little red box that would be stationed around like Walmart, stuff like that, and it was basically a Blockbuster, a mobile Blockbuster. You could rent a movie, you paid all there, and then when you was done, you returned it to that same box. So it was not only Redbox but Netflix had they were starting to come online, and because they didn't have any physical stores, and so Netflix would, in the early days of Netflix, you would get DVDs sent in the mail, and I remember that too. I remember feeling like Netflix was weird because, renting DVDs through the mail online, and that was one of the things that threw me off. Was like, you didn't think that Netflix, with that mail-in service, could take away Blockbuster. And in the movie, you find out that at one point, Netflix, CEO wants to sell their brand for $50 million to Blockbuster, and Blockbuster says no and laughs, and so that's what that's part of the reason why they went into bankruptcy. On top of, but the main reason they were saying in the movie was the 2007-2008 financial crisis. So very much a mix of both. But yeah, I mean, the reason why the creator of Netflix wanted to create Netflix was because of the late fees. The late fees would add up. So I think that's one of the things that Netflix kind of had on Blockbuster is the no late fees policy, right? You could rent a video and you wouldn't have to worry about late fees. And that makes me think about Netflix now, because I wonder if people even return them, And there was a point in this documentary where a guy was talking about how how some chains of the stores were closing down and they had to liquidate everything. And so the guy said, this is a pretty smart move by him. He basically rented all the video games at that store, and he never went back. And there was no way for that store to recover that because they were already shutting down. So that was pretty smart. He's a funny guy. Think about that. But yeah, I mean, there have been times where my late fees were piling up, and I would never go back to that particular Blockbuster. But I think there was a point where Blockbuster systems were interconnected. So if you had a late fee at a store at this location, it would also show up if you went to another location. But I don't think that was a thing in the early days of Blockbuster, so you could still get away with it. And another thing I liked about this documentary, basically shows the last living Blockbuster. It's in Bend, Oregon, right? I never heard about the town. And so this Blockbuster, being the last Blockbuster, it is basically like a monument for this small town. Because you have a lot of people from all over the world in the country coming to this small town to experience the feeling of going to a Blockbuster. And that's what I found that was so cool about it. It's like living history of the past, right? And so it kind of shows you how the Blockbuster mom, the manager of this last Blockbuster, kind of runs her business. She still has old computers and systems. Sometimes when there's not enough copies of a movie, or she can't find a specific movie, she'll find it somewhere else so that it will be in the store. So if you go to this Blockbuster in Bend, Oregon, and you're looking for a really particular movie and it's not there, you can just tell her, hey, can you add this? And she'll add it and it'll be there. So that's really cool. And it's just like, it just goes to show how people really value nostalgia and the experience of going into a physical store to rent a movie. The fact that, there has been a lot of articles, interviews from different media companies about this, and now you have this awesome documentary. And something I really found funny too was, as I was watching this documentary on YouTube. You can watch it for free. The link is below. But this movie was also available to rent or buy, on Amazon.com or YouTube, right? So I thought it was funny. Like, here I am watching a movie about a physical video rental store going out of business, and there's a rent button on my web browser, a rent or buy button. And so that's the experience now is, I'm watching a movie without going anywhere, right? So I think about that now, though. You think about the emergence of the internet, high-speed internet. And I think that physical video rental stores would have went out of business anyways because of the emergence of on-demand video and mail-in video. So you could make a case that Netflix itself didn't really bring Blockbuster down. It kind of adapted to the times. I think Blockbuster at one point tried to do the same thing that Netflix was doing with streaming services and on demand, but they came at a way, they did it later than Netflix did. So that's also part of the industry. Netflix was able to adapt to the times. Blockbuster was not. So Blockbuster has to file for bankruptcy, has to close its stores, and there's only one left. So it's like an ancient artifact. But just a very good documentary. It's only an hour and hour some minutes, but it goes by fast. Really interesting to see what people think about it, how people view video stores, the experience of renting a movie, holding that big brick in your hand. Or remember when you'd rent multiple movies, you'd have like 5 bricks in your hand. I remember the Blockbuster bags and how thick they were. These plastic Blockbuster bags. If you rented more than one movie, oh man, smelling that plastic of that box. And sometimes I just look to see if it was if the tape was rewound. The experience of the drop box, putting it inside the drop box. So you'll get that nostalgia when you watch this. But I just hope that this was a good kind of intro about Blockbuster and this documentary. So I want to make this video because I thought it was something that I would be meaning to do. And as a kid, as a person who grew up with Blockbusters around my city and town, I saw a lot of them, and now the last one being all the way in the West Coast in Oregon, one in the world, really hard to kind of wrap my head around. I would have never saw that. I would have never seen that coming. And so it makes me think, who will beat out Netflix? What will be the next thing? Is streaming the last? Are theaters next? Are physical movie theaters the next to go out of business? Because I can kind of see that, especially mom and pop movie theaters. I'm not talking like AMC big cinema movies, but mom and pop theaters around the country. I think they will go out of business, and I have a feeling that movie theaters themselves will be an ancient artifact. When was the last time you guys went to a physical theater? And what are the things that are making you not want to go? And I think it's because Why go to a theater when you can have the theater at home? You know, you can buy a surround sound system. You can eat. You can pop your own popcorn, and just being at home. People are homebodies now, so I'm interested to see how that kind of plays out. Well, thank you guys for watching, listening to my rant about the last Blockbuster. Till next time, I'll catch you guys later. Take care.